Alright, this time we are working on an Enesco again. The Yuletide Enchantment that plays Silver Bells. I have not opened this one yet either, like the last one. So we're going to see it together. It's another music box, which apparently is electrical. Uh-huh. Move the box out of the way. And we'll get rid of some of this foam. I don't want to get the paperwork out of the box so we can see what the paperwork says as well. Last piece of foam. The paperwork has nothing to do with what's wrong with it. It's just instructions on how to change the bulbs. It says it's a 1.5 volt bulb. 6 additional bulbs come with the musical. Has an off-on switch, an adapter jack, and to remove the soft plastic tubes from shipping to prevent any damage. I don't think any of those tubes are on here. Nope. And the reason it has the 6 extra bulbs it talked about is look how many are on this bad boy. Wow. That is a lot of light bulbs. And they just unscrew. A couple of them are hanging out, so they're not screwed in all the way. And of course, this is just the congratulations card when you buy some of these collectibles. So, let's see if we can find out what's wrong with it. It is a 9 volt, half amp power supply. There's the off-on switch, and there's the power port. And on the bottom, before I turn it on, it says Enesco, Silver Bells, and it says made in China exclusively for Enesco. There's a little tension. You can hear. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be that slick or not. Oh. No lights. And it's clicking really badly. Well, if this was a Lee Max or Department 56, it probably has a broken wire or a broken board connection, but for the lights, the clicking is usually indicative of a gear. So, let's pull up a chair and see how to take this one apart. Apparently the power's good because we're getting good power. Alright, I see screws under the edge that unscrew the dome. There are screws on the 4 feet, and there's screws in the base. There's 4 screws plus 4 in the center, which probably hold the drive mechanism. There's 4 screws just to the sides of the feet, which you might have saw when I had it over the first time. 1, 2, 3, one on my thumb. I bet you these just hold the feet on. They might go into the base itself. This probably holds the drive mechanism. There's your speaker slot. Then under the lip, if you can see, right in there, there's a screw. And then if you go to this, about every, 6 lights, there's a screw. Now it shows these bulbs just unscrew. So let's unscrew one just to see if we have power to these bulbs. There's a little guy. Turn on a power supply. So. my cables untangled. I didn't clean my bench off from the last one I worked on. Tone it down some. And I started off at a very low voltage, about 2 volts, give or take a hair here. Should be that the outer casing is ground, which is pretty standard. So yeah, they do work. There we go. You can see a little glow. There you go, right there. They are not LED, these are incandescents. So they probably take the full 9 volts. I don't think there's going to be much of a resistor on them. That was 2 volts. Let's screw this little bulb back in. Just like a regular house bulb, just miniaturized. There we go. So I'm going to start with the 4 outer screws. Carefully set it down on its side. Remember the last Enesco, it only had 3 screws. The 4th one was a dummy, and it was a wind-up music box that was animated versus a electric music box. I'm sandwiching it so it doesn't just fall apart. Apparently it doesn't come apart. Might have to take these feet off. No, there is play. That might be part of my problem. I can grab the screw hole and it flexes, but just to make sure these screws aren't extra long. So, no, they are. I think this might be part of the issue. It's always the longest part, trying to figure out how to remove the different things to get inside these animated houses. Once you figure it out, the next one should be easy. Nope, still not coming out. So the next step is make sure the switch isn't the problem. Nope. I'm going to take out the 4 center screws. Normally those just hold the drive, but if the drive is attached to the top, then it probably won't come out. So let's see if taking all 12 of these screws out solves the problem. Still does not want to separate. Let's see. Don't know where my spudger went. I like it when things disappear. Alright, the next step is just remove all the screws you can see. So we'll unscrew the roof. Try to keep the screws separated because they are all different sizes. I have two more. Get these things out. And last one. Well, that drops down the light ring. It does not remove the top. And wow. There'd be no way for me to show this on camera. There are 4 screws that are screwed in like this, holding this entire dome on. It looks like this mechanism should just lift straight out once it's detached from the bottom screws here. Unless there's a screw under the sticker. There's not. Okay. Very interesting light ring. Once I get it apart, I can show it to you better. So, how do we get inside this? This floor lift. Now this is going to take some finagling to try and figure out. I don't think it unscrews. Yeah, it's not changing any pressures. Well, I know why the light ring doesn't work. Why this didn't light up is because the wires are sheared inside. There's the axle that this spins on. Apparently the wires got caught on it. Probably was tipped on its side, got tipped back up, turned on, and the wires got caught on the axle, and they're all wrapped around, and they've ripped themselves free. So if I technically do this and this, to not overload the circuit, they are wired in groups of series and parallel. If you can see that, I have 5 lights on, and we have 5 lights soldered together. So they do a series of 6, and then they parallel to the next series of 6, because that glow right there is just under 6 volts. There are 6 volts. You can see that. And here is where the wire was attached. You can see it's all bound up right here, right there. If I can figure out how to get this top off, which again is screwed from the bottom, so it means it all has to come, everything has to disconnect down here. The spindle assembly is just wrapped. So they're not moving when I do this, but they are wrapped around it. I can see them through the sides. And that's why these lights don't work. So with one problem addressed, one problem figured out, you have to get it apart to solve it though. Another problem is how to get it apart to find out the clicking sounds. So let's see. No movement there. There's some indentations. I don't know if these are clips, but I'm going to put a little pressure on them. They are springy. Get a little bit more light. There we go. Figures. Just trying to look inside to see what might be holding this, and just as I got the screwdriver in there, it slid. Might be a little better light. Well, I see a gear. Let's see if I can find out what these metal springy things are. They look like gear tensioners. Okay, there's the switch. Alright, I see some wires, a lot of grease. That's the mechanism. There are some gears, a couple of big ones. Looks like it's attached directly to this base. I see no reason why the bottom isn't popping off. Of course there is a reason, because if there wasn't, it would have already come off. Right here, this hub, I think, is what it's stuck on, this pressed on plastic disc. I don't know if this disc comes out or if I have to pull this off of the disc. I can't see all the way that far in because there is a cluster of gears and wires all throughout the base that I can see looking with the light. This light would block my field of view too much. And then here and here, these indentations are the metal plates that are screwed through for the power wire. This is screwed here on both sides. These metal plates run this way, and this is actually electric. So, yeah. Hate to spend the next hour trying to show you how to take this thing apart. But anyhow, I might probably just going to stop and then figure out how to do this and then show you once I get it, because I do not know how to get this thing apart. So I'm gonna sit here and figure it out and not waste 2 hours of recording so you guys get bored. I shall return. Not just that, I'm probably gonna have to leave shortly to go back to work. So see if I can get it figured out before I leave, and then I'll show you all how I did it once I figure it out myself. Shall return. All right, got it apart. Had to carefully break the top off. I mean carefully as I heated it up and worked my way around it until it broke free. Then I had to drill the center out because it was full of plastic and resin. Use a small screwdriver, put it in there, and there is an itty bitty little screw in there. Once I unscrewed that, the top came right off, which then I lifted off the light ring with the broken wires. So that's the back of the light ring. These are in series parallels. Because it's only 9 volts and each one of these is 1.5. So if they ran them all together, it would barely turn on. So you got these, so you got 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5. So yeah, so they're running them a hair over their max. And since I got it out, I might as well just quickly make sure they're all screwed in, because some of them are loose, so that way they don't fall out. Because the paperwork says they're standard, but paperwork also came out a long time ago. So there we go, nice and snug. So now we get to the basic rotor assembly. Here's the wires, as mentioned. They're all twisted up and tangled and destroyed. They're all wrapped around this piece. So, somehow in this rotating mass, this must have spun as well and caught that. So, got to lift off this. Get rid of the tape. So there's the center rotor. When I was telling you about the pins, the pin goes in there. You see the hole there? And comes out over here. It's broken plastic. I'm not sure where it was, if it fell out when I was working on it or if it fell down this hole. But believe at one point this was one solid piece, and that's probably why it spun. So, and now we lift off the drum. We'll take a look. We got the stationary big gear here, and we got two sets of gears, one over here which makes those two horses move, and one over here that makes, reindeer. Let's quickly check the teeth. They all look good. All look good. Those all look good. The screws I was saying I could see from the inside with the metal bars. Here's, let's get some more light. Here is the incoming power port, which is right here. And we have the wire, the red wire goes over to this bar here, and this thin black wire goes over to this bar here. And those bars run under this stationary gear to these lugs right here, which then transfer up into the circuit board and the motor. The other pin I was mentioning I could see, there's one here, and there's one here which I got out. So I'm surprised this doesn't come out, probably because this axle is double pinned down here. And a little padding. This big gear right here looks okay, so the clacking is going to come from one of these smaller gears in here. And it looks like the only way to get to it is to remove the 4 screws. Actually, since this is disconnected, I don't want to break the wires. We'll have to re-screw this back on. So, kind of like Department 56 or Mr. Christmas, you have to get the top center off and the access screws there, then it starts coming apart. I kind of was hoping it was that way, and I was figuring it was that way, except I couldn't get that top piece to come off easily. Alright. Wow, this has a lot of little gears. It's got 2 motors, one for the music box and one for the animatronics. This is the animatronic motor right here. I'm going to take a seat and get a little closer to my work. So, let's unscrew the top, which appears to be 4 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4. Screws that are falling out are the screws that hold it to this. Alright, well that pin is now impeding my ability to disassemble this. These are those. There's the 4. Alright. Alright, there's one more screw right smack dab in the middle, not this one. This one isn't, but this one is in the way of me rotating this disc. Oh, maybe it is these two. There we go. So yeah. Alright, so there's 6 screws. You have to pop that disc off the bottom. Let's put this one back in. This one holds the music box in. Again, I don't need to take that out. There we go. Just looking at the gears. I know it was clacking. Oh yeah, the main gear right off the motor is bad. So this gear and this gear are slip gears, meaning they spin independently from the shaft. They're just using the axle shaft as an alignment. This gear and the big gear are stempled on, and this gear is stempled on, and this gear is split all the way. So I don't know if it's going to be completely visible. Focus, there you go. You see the crack right there with my fingernail, and it goes all the way up to the nose of the gear. That's going to be a clacking sound. It's probably jumping on that one broken tooth. Now, because this is the main gear that touches this worm gear, I'm going to check this worm gear, see if there's any damage to the threads. Looks okay. And while we have it apart, let's plug it in. Motor spins good. Motor spinning good. You may not be able to see them spinning with the distance and the fact that they're spinning at a high rate of speed. So, and while it's spinning, I'm checking the teeth on this big gear, which drives the drum for the music box, to see if anything is showing any wear or cracks that I have to be concerned about, which it looks pretty good. And I'll check this itty bitty gear. There's a gear here, gear here, gear here, here, and of course this big guy. Okay, I thought it was a crack. Or a chipped tooth. It's a piece of debris stuck in one of the gears. One of the teeth. Alright, so now let's see if I have a new gear to replace this gear. Which I just spilled some of my gears. You might remember these gears from one of the previous ones that I did. Gears I got from Amazon that I spilled. So I'm going to quickly pick them up so I can, well, spill them again. This time purposely though. Because I'm going to try and find this. Immediately get rid of some of the obvious choices like the pulleys and the really large gears and any of the worm gears. Alright, here's the contender. It's a worm gear. That's way too big. But this guy. Too small. Too small. Another worm. Too big. Yeah, and you're probably going, you're not using the one on the shaft. It's because they're the same gear. It's the same exact gear. Even the part numbers on the back are the same. Big, big. Too big. Way too big. Oh, maybe. How is the front? Okay, the nose is the same. Now I'm going to slide it on backwards. And perfect. So I do have a gear. I'm going to check if I have two gears in case I break one. Some people call it preventative planning. I call it Murphy. The Enesco on the right track one, that guy, yes, I do have two. So we're good. Like I said, on that one, I went through over about a dozen gears trying to fix the engine, and I wasn't successful. And that's because I think it's because of the motor. But I'm hoping it's not because these gears are cheap. So I'm just going to clean up the workspace. And this time actually pop the cap on. I'd say this should slide off pretty easy since it's split. And it's gone. Take me just a moment here because the gears are staggered. I have to try and stagger them as I put them on. I have an idea. I'll stagger them and I'll stick them in the top first. Like so. carefully push it back together, making sure all the teeth mesh, meaning that it's not binding. There we go. Sometimes when you push them back together, the teeth are in the same direction, so they're hitting each other. Alright, it's back together. I'm holding it together because I'm not using any screws at the moment. And let's see if it turns. Look at that. So, let's put it back together with some screws. And put a load on it. And a load will be the drum. I don't know what the real name's called. I call them drums because it's basically a drum. It rotates. So if you're looking up parts, they may call it something else. They may call it a character mechanism or the ride ring. I have no clue. Alright, where's the little screws? Right there. Didn't think centering this thing back up would be so difficult. Oh, there we go. Had it 90 degrees out. That'll do it. Trying to get that plate I took off centers the axle on the bottom, which I didn't want to drop in. If you do have to take this apart like this, just be mindful of the small wires. So when you run the screws back in, that you don't pinch the wires. or put a screw through one. There we go. Actually had that today at work. Electronic component didn't work because product ran a screw right through the control panel's cabling. Made for a big intermittent problem that nobody could figure out. So. See what's going to be the best way to get this down. The metal shaft doesn't spin. It's just a solid bar to hold everything center. So I'm going to put a little tape on the wires, try and hold them up. There's one, there's two. Seated. Wires are up. Look at that. Spins. It's alive. Now, how do we fix this light ring? Alright, I'm going to have to take the tape back off because this piece is going to hit it. But that's a good cheater way to get your wires up through the center. Yeah, there's some broken plastic from that center alignment piece. Okay, that's garbage. That goes there. That lines up with the hole for the pin. And that should keep the drum from walking. Trying to find the pins. I'll look for it in a second. that's working good. Let's see about these lights. So this outer ring should be hot, and this inner ring should be negative. We're at 3 volts. That's what I started off at. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to dim some of these lights, these intense ones, and see. And that's the unit's full running power. Which we have a bad connection, hence the reason. Yep. Looks like there's a bad solder joint right here. That's why it's flickering. But we have one. That guy's on, but it's really dim. So you have one. So what was that one? Okay, these two guys are dim. Could be dirty sockets. And this one doesn't work at all. And the reason the lights went out when I unscrewed it is they're in series, so if I disconnect one, there's no more connection. The book says these are only 1.5 volts, so I'm going to drop this down to just under a volt. That way I'm not blinded when they turn on. So this one is definitely burned out. This one works, but it's really dim. So it says 1.5 volts. Let's bump it up to 1.5 volts. It's brighter. So now that one's on, it's just really dim. So those are the two that were on but dim. Now let's check the one that didn't work at all. Oh, it's dim as well. I'm thinking we got a whole bunch of bad solder joints. I'm trying to get you a little bit better view here. Get a little bit more light on the subject. I don't know if you can see how globby this solder is. And when I was pushing on these solder joints right here, that's when these lights were flickering. It's actually starting to separate right there. Might just have to go back through and re-solder this entire ring. Just take some new solder and reflow to ensure that the solder joints are good to each one of the contacts that are in series, and then the 2 parallel bars where they make contact at each section of lights. Like that one's really thin, that one's thick, that one's globby, that one's really globby, that one's globby, that one's globby, globby, and thin. You can kind of see that it's just barely making any contact. It's a really thin section. So that might be the cause of most of the failure on this light ring. As far as the light's not functioning, is probably just the solder. The solder is just deteriorating, and it wasn't the best solder job at the time. I know that they got that one hot, and that one hot, and that one hot, because you can see where they melted and burned the ring. The discoloration, and it's actually melted right there. And that one not so much. So just spend some time doing some solder work, try and get this ring to come back to life. So, screw these back in so we don't lose and or break them. That's one. Two. And some of these lights that are proud of other lights, it's just like this one is taller. It's not that the light's any different. If you look at the height of this compared to this is recessed, this one's not. Some of these are just pushed in really far. So if you have this piece, it's not that they're different size light bulbs, it's just the quality control when they put this thing together. So anyway, you've seen me solder 100 times, I'm sure, if you watched all the videos, and I'm sure you don't want to watch me do this because this is going to be somewhat tedious and long and boring. So I'm going to pause it while I resolder this and make it look pretty, and then I'm going to try and figure out at the same time what can be done regarding this, because this, when it's attached to this, is what keeps this from spinning and wrapping these wires. So yeah, so we got a little bit of figuring out to do. I'm sure I could probably use some Gorilla Glue and just glob it on there, get it nice and hard, and chisel or cut or sand off the excess. But there's actually chunks of plastic missing, so that's gonna be a lot of fill work, and it'll have to be done, one, not in here and not on here, so it doesn't glue itself to the shaft. I'll have to put something in here, such as a dowel rod or a skewer, so that way if I do glue it on, I can break it off and then clean it out and not worry about damaging the metal shaft that's already in here. So there's going to be a little extra work to stop this piece from rotating with this piece, wrapping the wires up, snapping all the lights, power wires off of that piece. So first thing I'm going to do though is clean up that ring, make it look pretty as far as the solder joints go, get it fully, hopefully functional. If I still get dim lights, I'll probably unscrew all the light bulbs. I just don't want to do it at the moment so I don't lose them. I will probably unscrew them when I solder it so I don't push down and break any. And clean out the sockets using a Q-tip and alcohol if any of the sockets are dirty on the inside. I'm not talking dust dirty, I'm talking corrosion dirty, where you get the discoloration. Usually it's a blue-green color, but sometimes it can just be dark, like on the brass, where it's discoloring. So, and then the person that owns this, she asked if I could find some lights. So I got a couple of lights shipped into me for free. They were called hobby lights for hobbies. Unfortunately, the lights that were shipped to me, which are all low powered lights, don't get me wrong, they're all way too big. So, same shape, same voltage, wrong size. So I have not been successful in finding spares, although the book that comes with this says they're standard. Probably back when this was made. So, anyhow, I shall return. Okay. I have it mostly together. I wanted you to see how to fix this upper hub. So, turn it off. There we go. I'm going to kill the power to it as well, just to be safe. So, this screwed on. This is the screw. And so this plastic's all broke. I think I showed that to you earlier in the video. And the other side's all broke too. And there's a gap in the middle that that pin went through. which that pin is right here. Well, that pin can't hold anything because, well, there's no plastic left. So I 3D printed a spacer. It's a little bit bigger than I wanted. Apparently I screwed up in the dimensions. So it needs a cotter pin now versus a real pin. And then there's the bottom half, which has the light wires through it. We'll pull those out. Anyhow, keep my finger over the hole so I don't lose the screw. There's a gap. That's that broken plastic I've been pulling out. So, with some rough tools, being an X-Acto knife and a portable drill here, and a bigger drill bit for the hole in the center, made it so this interlocks, slides inside those two grooves so it can't turn. This will be glued in. This part will be one solid piece. This part will be held in with the pressure of the screw. So the screw is going to push it. As you can see, it slides it down so it can't turn. And then of course the cotter pin goes all the way through and stops the whole thing from spinning. So basically what happened with all these light wires that screwed up this light ring and mangled everything was this is supposed to turn, the top's not. This is the only thing that kept it from spinning. This was pinned in two spots, so this would center the drum, allow it to ride on these four little plastic standoffs, so that way it wouldn't have a whole bunch of friction pushing down on it. And then of course it would just hold the roof or the top. Well, with the plastic breaking, probably because it's a 30-year-old product, this started to spin because the light ring is really, really close. Very little slack. So as this drum is rotating, every once in a while it's probably grabbing this light ring, causing it to rotate, which then causes this to rotate. And it kept spinning in a circle until the wires wrapped itself around the axle, and then causing it to break the gear in the bottom and rip all the wiring out. So I did fix the light ring so they're a little bit brighter. You should be able to see the shinier solder now. And then some of this burnt stuff, not all of it is melted, like right here, that's melted, but this splatter is actually flux. That was some of their excess flux they used on the main contact points. It was really obvious once I got it hot, the smell and the smoke and the bubbling sound. So, but I wanted you to see I 3D printed a spacer. The spacer was supposed to be slightly smaller in diameter. Oh well, it is what it is. It's fine, it works. My coupling implements aren't the greatest. It's kind of jagged. That's also because when I did a 3D print, I didn't go with a solid core. I went with a honeycomb core. Didn't realize that. And so it's a little jagged on the inside. So my only support, which is mainly all I cared about, was the faces and the outer drum. I don't care really about the inner, because I just need the faces and the outer drum to hold that in place so it can't rotate. And then a cotter pin works fine. I just went through a drawer of cotter pins till I found one that was the same diameter as the original metal pin. Great thing about the cotter pin is if you really want to make sure it doesn't come out, once you shove it through the other side, you can of course fold it over. I am not going to do that. It fits really tight. You can see it doesn't need a lot of friction. Because if you need to take this apart, you need to drop that light ring, reach in with pliers, pull the cotter pin after you unscrew it to lift the top. If this is bent out, you're never getting this thing apart again. So, I mean, the most I can do is just put a little bit of a bend in it like that, just a small gap, a little spring tension. But anything more than that, you'll never get this thing back apart. And I'm not saying it'll ever have to come back apart, but anything mechanical and electrical, it doesn't last forever. It will need to be serviced at some point. So this is my makeshift replacement for the chunks of plastic that were missing that holds the drum. So, alright, so I'm going to go ahead and finish reassembly. And we're going to test it out and make sure it works, package it up, and get it shipped back to its owner. So this has been a month or so project, trying to, 1, get it apart, and 2, figure out what's wrong with it, 3, wait for the gears, and then 4, sit there and figure out how to use the OpenSCAD, or what's it called? OpenSCAD service for doing 3D print. So, and apparently I screwed it up because I made my drum too big. But it works perfectly, actually. The drum was supposed to be a little bit smaller diameter. But so that's that. So we'll be back once it's together and fully functional. Hopefully all the lights will be working like they're supposed to when it's run off at this power and not my bench power. Because bench power, everything works fine. This is the important one. So, alright, shall return. Okay, it's back together and working. Turn off the lights. There you go. I want to tip it all the way because that puts uneven pressure on the barrel and the gears. It's no longer clicking. All the lights light up except one of them did burn out, unfortunately. I'm going to have to try and find a new one. I was afraid that was going to happen with the jostling, that the filament would break. So the only thing that's left to do on this is to, and let's turn it off so it's not so noisy, is to glue this on. I'm not going to use Gorilla Glue or anything like that. I want to use something that can be broken down in the future. Excuse me. So you get to this screw right here. And so I'm just going to use hot glue because hot glue is easy to take off. So I'm just going to make sure this is snug before I glue it in. Have the hot glue heating up. Still not hot enough yet. But I also did replace one other gear inside the bottom. I just replaced the one that was cracked. When I was reassembling it, I caught this and spun it, which broke one of the other gears. So there's 2 new gears in the bottom. The lights are resoldered. The wires resoldered and pinned to the roof. There's actually 2 little clips so the wires don't hit the top of the barrel where it's rotating and where these little bars are going up and down, which is what happened the last time because that center hub broke. Also replaced the center hub with a big old spacer and a cotter pin, and I glued to the bottom only, and the top sinks in all the way, so that way when you unscrew this screw and remove the 6 screws to hold this light ring in, you can just remove the entire top and not have to reach in there with those pliers and pull out that pin. So then you can pull the cotter pin out to slide the rest of it apart. So I made it a little bit more serviceable in the future and 3D printed up a small piece to do so. Alright, I got some hot glue now. Also want to make sure the hot glue doesn't drip inside on top of the screw, because if it did, it would make it really hard to take it back out. Because when the threads or the cross of the screw is full of glue, it makes it really difficult to unscrew, especially when it's full of that hard resin type glues that they like to use. There we go. So it is done, except for the burned out light bulb, which is right here. And if one burns out, it takes out an entire string of 6, which kind of sucks. So I put it in the back. I moved them around so the burned out bulb's in the back. So, but it's finished. It was a process. Trying to get it apart and then trying to make pieces to make it work, and then having to order another gear set to replace the 1 gear. And of course I had to replace 2, as well as 3D printing a drum or a barrel adapter to fix the top. Reflowing all the solder, you saw how bright the lights were. They are actually still a yellow, golden, warm colored light, but they're a lot brighter than they were when I first plugged it in. So, but this has been the Enesco Yuletide Enchantment Deluxe Action Musical Box that plays the tune of Silver Bells. Reassembled with new parts. It's ready to go back to its owner. But in the meantime, I'm going to try and find a new light bulb online. The instructions just tell me it's a 1.5 volt light, so I have the burnt one out so I can mic it and try and find some little lights that are 1.5 volt rated with that dimensions, and then see if I can locate a bulb. And again, this was made in 1992, so it's almost 30 years old, and it's back up and running. So we'll see what we can do about the light. Other than that, thanks for watching. Till the next one.